is old enough in this room to remember when being a stewardess was so prestigious? No, that's not the whole question. I know you remember stewardesses, but who remembers when being a stewardess was so prestigious that your story was put in the local newspaper when you got hired? It's amazing. I love that. I love that. It was like being a Hollywood celebrity, is it not? And someone who would certainly know about that is our next speaker, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, because her professional pivot took her from being the Hollywood glamour girl of a stewardess to being the Hollywood glamour girl in its own right. So before I call her up to the stage to regale us with her life as a stewardess and what happened after that, I just want to show you a brief film from Cheryl Boone Isaacs, and then she's going to hopefully finish the last bite of her dinner, no rush, and she's going to come up and talk to us, okay? So can we see that video, please? During Cheryl's time in Hollywood. Yeah, come on up, let's get a look at you. She was a marketing executive for several Hollywood blockbusters. She was president, as we saw, of the American Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. She made another pivot. She moved to Arizona, and she is now presiding over the Sidney Poitier New American Film School at Arizona State University. I kind of want to say, and the envelope, please, but here she is, Cheryl Boone Isaacs.
Okay, these lights are bright. Thanks so much. I am very, very, very honored to be here tonight. When Linda first reached out to me, I was a little surprised because it was literally 50 years ago when and I love saying stewardess, and I still say it all the time. And I really was. I was touched, and we had some wonderful conversations, and it brought back a lot of memories that actually don't leave my brain, because I always think about. I know this. You probably think, "Are you kidding? You went to Hollywood. Why are you still thinking about Pan Am?" I do, because it was so influential in my life. Let me, in the very beginning, I was born and raised in Western Massachusetts, and I was truly blessed to be born into a great family. We were very close. Few left us, but the few that are still around, we're still very, very close. However, New England, for all of its greatness, was kind of a little restrictive in my mind, and this was in the 60s. And I was very interested in politics, especially international. And so I went to college in California, much to the slight horror of my parents, to fly across the country. And that flight, which I cried the entire way on American Airlines, I cried the entire time. What am I doing? Did I make the right choice? But deep down inside, I knew I did. And I loved flying through the clouds, which I have never gotten over at all. I still love it. I feel like, you're in a pillow or something. It's just mighty and wonderful. At Whittier, studying political science, then they had a program, a program in Copenhagen. Again, my parents are freaked out. This is 1969, and I'm going to Denmark. Okay. They never said anything, though. I always wondered years later. They never said, "Why are you doing this?" But I think my older sibs, and you saw one of my older siblings, probably talked them down and said, "Don't worry, she'll be fine." And I was fine. But I tell you, it really opened my mind even more than going to California, to go to another continent, another country, and I became even more enamored with the global experience. The trajectory at that time was I was going to go to grad school after. In those days, there was an agency called USIA. Do you all know about that? Right? Huh? And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work for the USIA. But that meant grad school. I was itching. That experience, going to Europe, I had to. So when I graduated, again, my poor parents, and my mother was scared to death of flying, so, but I said, guess what? I've got a new job. And, oh yeah, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to be a stewardess for Pan American Airlines. Okay, dead silence. And I said, you guys, you know me. You know me. I have to do this. I don't have any money. I just graduated from school. I just changed my trajectory by deciding not to go to grad school. And I just need to see the world. I just have to have more of that. So this was in 1972. In March 72, I became a Pan Am stewardess. And, going to stew school, as we called it, that was interesting because I met all these wonderful, interesting, and gorgeous females from around the world. And it just, my whole world just blew up in such a big, big way that I will never to this day forget. And so first I flew out of JFK for about 6 months. And so I got to see Europe, the Middle East, speaking of the Shah, in Tehran. I mean, what experience, right, early on. And the Caribbean, the 3 little areas. The very first day when, even in stew school, I put in for a transfer because I wanted to go back to California. But that was pretty senior, either Los Angeles or San Francisco. So I didn't know when that was going to happen. Well, 6 months later, it did. And that was just after London opened, and many of the stewardesses wanted to go back to Europe because so many were from Europe. And that opened the way for me to go to San Francisco. So there, I got to travel through Asia and Australia, New Zealand, South America. So Pan Am allowed me to see the world. Oh, and one little point I should have brought up earlier. While in Copenhagen, we students would go to the movies. And guess what commercial was our favorite? And if anybody had told me then that I would work for Pan Am, I would not have believed them, because it was such a thing. Here were American students going to one I remember absolute was Easy Rider, because it was the 60s, we're all in it. And then there was Pan Am, and we started screaming in the theater, so everybody in that room knew that we were American. But we were so proud. It was just, I can still see the illustrations. Anyway, so Pan Am allowed me to really grow. I would say even more than my college education. And to this day, I still love to travel and to experience other cultures. How humankind works with the planet. How is the architecture? How are the clothes? What is the food? What is it? So it was just a great experience. And I want to bring up a recent story that one of my bestie girlfriends got married about a year ago, and I hadn't met her husband. And I went to see them about a month ago. And we're sitting there getting to know each other. You know, she wanted me, because I'm one of her besties, to meet me, and we got talking, blah, blah, blah. And then Casey says, John, Cheryl was a stewardess. And he said, oh, really? What airline? And I said, Pan American. And he said, now, I'm not coming on to you or anything, but I want you to know that Pan Am stewardesses have a special place in my heart. Now, this is just like a month or so ago. And I said to him, yeah, because I did know that he had been a colonel as a Green Beret. So I knew exactly when he said that, what that meant. So he told me that, and I could see his face. It was quite tender. And I said to him, so when that big white 747 aircraft flew into Tunsanut with that American flag on the back of the plane, that's what you all saw, right? And he said, you have no idea what it did for us when we would see that plane. And it you know, even now I'm like, because I know exactly what he's talking about. And I said, all right, I'm going to tell you my side of that story. I said, when we landed, there were a number of times that we would be asked to go out and, they would open the door, right? In those days, you didn't have the walkway, right? God, I wish we could go back to that. Anyway, and they asked us to stand out and wave to the soldiers that were there to see what they said, American girls, but actually they're from around the world. And we would wave back. And that was such an experience for me. Also, not long after that, when the children that were being flown in from Vietnam to be adopted, I would go on my days off and spend time with those kids. And I can still remember this little girl that I wished that I could take home. But she was being adopted, I remember, by a family in Colorado. And so I just want you to know that Pan Am will always be close in my heart. And all of the great, just at a time in my life, just really brought it forward. So many people have said to me, oh, so you were a stewardess. Now, how did you get to be head of the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences? Which I always think is, I don't know, was there a pathway? I didn't know there was. I never really had any pathway. It was kind of whatever interests me, even right up to now. The only reason why I didn't continue, I flew for 2 years, any longer, was because of the energy crisis of 73, 74. And because everything in the United States, right, kind of closed in a little bit, and there were furloughs and a lot of movement. I still remember waiting in line in my car for 45 minutes to get gas. Do you remember that? Can you imagine trying to pull that today with the American public? Oh my gosh, they would not be able to handle that for one darn second, right? Oh, they're so sensitive now. Anyway, just get in the car, waiting. Don't go below a half a tank, right? Because you don't know how long you're going to be in line. Anyway, and so because I was pretty junior, my choices were to fly out of Hawaii or Houston. Houston to me was a turnaround. And I had my favorite flight out of San Francisco. And that was from San Francisco to Tokyo to Hong Kong, then down to Australia. Then turning around, it would either be Fiji or Tahiti, then into Hawaii, and then home. Are you kidding? That was my absolute favorite. So those months when I want that, I want that, I want that. It also allowed me to be in San Francisco and not work there. So I was kind of like a tourist at this, in my hometown. It was really interesting. Anyway, when I decided, we didn't know how long this embargo, I guess, with oil was going to last. So I thought, okay. So now I'm like, did a few jobs in San Francisco and then realized, what am I doing? I'm 25, 26. I need a career. Okay. So as in my little story there, my older brother, who was very successful in the film business, and we'd go to see West Side Story. He would bring films home on 16 millimeter and show them. So we were the hit of the neighborhood. And I would visit him when he worked at United Artists in New York City. But I never for a second thought I would work in the business because he was really smart. And I didn't think I was anywhere near that. So that really, I loved films, but that wasn't a thought until one day I thought, okay, wait a minute. Let's be honest, San Francisco did not have many choices for a career growth because this was before Silicon Valley. Of course there was, but not anything I was very interested in. And I had a nice, good talk with myself and said, okay, you love the film business. Let's go. So packed up the cats and all of the plants and my boyfriend's car, and we drove down to Los Angeles. And I stayed with my brother, and I said, by the way, I want to be in the film business. And he said, I'm not going to help you. And I like telling that story. And the young students now, they go, are you kidding? Why would he do that? And I said, because he knew how challenging it was, how the opportunities for women, and certainly people of color, was pretty limited unless you were a performer, and even that was kind of limited. So, and he just knew the rigor of it all, the challenges, the toughness, and I'm his little sister. And he was not that for it, but I said, I'm going to do it without you. And I went out knocking on doors, and I finally was hired by Columbia Pictures, and the first movie I ever worked on was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I couldn't even believe that. I drove onto a studio lot. Okay. Wow, I didn't know. But so that was the beginning of, I don't know, what year is this now? Quite a lot of years. And I worked at Columbia for a few years, and then I got a call from someone who ran another company, a small company called Melman Simon Productions. Nobody has ever heard of that. But in those days, independent films, which this was, where there was quite a few. And I learned a lot there. I started as a coordinator of advertising and publicity, and 5 years later, I left as vice president of advertising and publicity. I had great mentors who worked me really hard. I'd go to the restroom and cry my eyes out. Throw water on them, little lip gloss, go back out. Okay, you can't take us down. And it was a great experience. And then I would, maybe this one movie you all might remember, and it's called Porky's. Anybody remember Porky's? Still one of the funniest movies ever, right? Probably couldn't get away with it now with some of the language. And it was great because the leaders, the head of that company, asked the youngins, of which I was one of like 4 or 5, what do you think of the script? And we laughed. We said, oh, you got to make it. And they actually did. And it was very successful. Anyway, I then moved over to the Ladd Company, run by Alan Ladd Jr., who had left 20th Century Fox, where he did great and wonderful things, but probably the most memorable is when George Lucas pitched him Star Wars. Laddie said yes. And what was interesting also about that time is my brother was the first Hollywood executive to have the title of President of Marketing and Distribution at Fox and set the campaign for that first movie. So, a little challenging, but anyway, I love Star Wars. Star Wars forever, Star Wars forever. Anyway, it's just a few little points. And then but then again, there was another financial crisis in the world, and independent film companies were hit a little hard because of the international markets. So I thought I better get back into a studio, And the only 2 studios I wanted to work for were either Warner Brothers or Paramount, because they made all the cool movies, especially Paramount. They had Flashdance, and they had Footloose, and they had 48 Hours, and so I noticed in one of the trade papers that a woman in the publicity department was leaving to get married. So I called the head of the department and said, I read that, can't remember her name now, is leaving. Are you looking for replacements? I'd really love to be considered. So I got hired. It took a little bit of time because obviously I talked to other people, but I was hired and I was very, very happy to be at Paramount, where I started as West Coast publicity and promotions director, and was there for 13 years, moving all the way up to executive vice president of worldwide publicity, covering all Paramount movies. And it was a great experience. And I tell you, Nancy's had, that's when I met you. And her husband, who was a friend and then became my boss, and it actually was the very first interview I ever had in Hollywood before I got the Columbia Pictures gig. I don't know if you knew that. Did you? Okay. And so Sid Gannis and I, forever and for years. Okay, close. So while at Paramount, one of the colleagues, who happened to also be a boss, came into my office and said, here, fill this out. And I said, what is it? And she said, membership application for the Academy. And I went, oh, that's not happening. I said, you got to be kidding me, Marty Moran's. And I said, no, I've only been in the business 10 years. That can't be happening. Anyway, she said, just fill it out. Okay, she's my boss. So I did. Turned it in, and I was accepted into the membership. So I cried when I got the position at Pan Am. I cried when I got this, and I cry a lot. I get emotional, in a good way. So that started sort of another course with me. I was working diligently in the film business, and then I got involved with the Academy. And then a couple of years later, a senior editor at one of our trade publications, Variety, called me up and said, I need you to teach. What do you mean? And he said, the new Peter Stark graduate program at USC to teach marketing publicity. And again, I went, you're out of your mind. I mean, it's a grad program. I'm not even a grad. I don't have an MFA. And he goes, everybody's so pushy. You're going to do it. I mean, and he was very powerful, A.D. Murphy. Okay, so now I've got these 3 tracks, which I never realized till about 5 years ago that I was doing these 3 tracks. Anyway, so the film business and the Academy was one more major step in my world view in so many different ways. It was a great experience. It was pretty challenging. Each year I seemed to have a crisis. That didn't happen before. I'd been on the board 21 years before I was made president. I don't remember anybody having this kind of difficulty. So in those 4 years, there were 2 years of Oscars So White. So I've spent my whole career behind the camera. Now, all of a sudden, I'm in front. I don't know why anybody wants to be famous. I really don't. I thought, this is challenging. This is pretty weird. And then my last year, when I just thought, in the words of Michael Corleone, I thought I was out, and then they pulled me back in when we had the envelope gate. I sat there going, you have got to be kidding. I'm almost out of here. And one more, it's just crazy. But all good, all good. It was a great, great, great experience. I love the Academy tremendously. Not quite as much as Pan Am, but that's just a little plug, probably the same. Anyway, and then because I'd been on the board for 24 years, I thought, don't stay. This is, you need to have new blood and turnover. Got to leave. Got to have, try to get other members of the board to do the same thing. But because you need new blood, you need things to keep circulating and improving and changing. So I thought I'm going to take a break, because that was quite a bit for those couple of years, but I was still teaching. And I was an independent, I would work with independent filmmakers from around the world, because I love that. And during my time at the Academy, we also opened our membership to a more diverse group of filmmakers in America, but to me, even more important, internationally, because this is a medium that is a global concept. Storytelling is a global concept. Every nation, every country has a history of storytelling, right? And that was really great in traveling the world representing. Unfortunately, Pan Am wasn't working then, so I couldn't fly Pan Am. Yeah, missed opportunity again. So then COVID hit. All right, so this for everybody, right? It's a redirect now. Now what are you going to do? And then I get an email asking if I would be interested in talking to Arizona State University regarding their film school. I thought, okay. But my first thought was, I'm not moving to Arizona. I'd lived in California for 40 some odd years. I'd never lived from Massachusetts, New York, and California. I've never lived in a landlocked state. The ocean was pretty close each time. Now it's like, okay. But what really persuaded me was the fact that the school was named after Sidney Poitier. And Sidney, I met him first when I was in high school, because he was a very close friend with my brother. When he absolutely was what you would expect him to be. And that is absolute. So that's when I said, sure, I'll do that. I'd like to do that, because I do like teaching. I love students. And so it was a pretty new school. It's only been in existence for about 5 years. No, then it got started just as COVID. And I started in 22, the first year I lived in LA. But I realized the power was in Arizona, so I moved to Arizona. And other than this time, 120 degrees is a little steep, But as one of my colleagues said, when you were in Massachusetts, what did you do in this winter? You stayed in the house, got warm, ran to the car, heated up the car, and went about your business to wherever. It's just a switch. Now it's the summer that you stay inside to be cool. And the rest of the 8 months is great. Absolutely great. I love it. So we've been spending time. You can still click through, Linda. We've come up with these 3 pillars for our school, which is exceptional storytelling, creative collaboration, and honoring the legacy. So this is our guide for our education. There's another, I think there's one more slide. And ASU, you can read it yourself, it's kind of hard. It's a comprehensive public research university measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes. And how, I'm sorry, I can't read it all, but you can all read. But that really hit me too, because that was also part of the academy and dating all the way back to Pan Am. Okay? Since then, I have traveled to Kenya and to India to speak with students about enrolling in our program. My next group of trips, I want South Korea, Singapore, and Dubai, because I also know those areas. Storytelling is great. It's really good, fabulous filmmakers from around the world. So that's kind of like my story of where I am today. And I just wanted to be able to share with you, and I told Linda, how important and truly, that short time working with Paramount just opened my eyes to the world. And I'm forever thankful for that. And I thank all of you very much.